yoga. Now, according to him, the phenomenon of yoga is universal. Now, Sri Aurobindo was a person who gave a beautiful theory of evolution. Now, according to him, the whole of creation is basically in a state of evolution. And this evolution is preceded by what he called as an involution of consciousness into matter. Now, evolution was also equated by him to yoga. We can almost say that the terms evolution and yoga were used by Aurobindo almost synonymously. And so, in this sense, Aurobindo says that the whole of creation is in a state of yoga. But he adds that the yoga in nature is a slow and tardy one and takes millions and sometimes even billions of years for culmination. Then, what is the role of integral yoga? Integral yoga there acts as a catalyst. The practice of integral yoga shrinks the duration of the yogic culmination to either a single or a few lifetimes. So that therein lies the importance and significance of integral yoga. And not only that, leading a life not in tune with yoga only exposes you to all the dichotomies of the world, all the challenges of the world. So in that way, yoga is one sure shot way for taking you to your goal directly. And the goal is a state of bliss as conceived by Sri Aurobindo. So that makes integral yoga something that is really worthy of pursuit. Now, the goal of integral yoga, as the goal of integral yoga coincides with the goal and purpose of all life forms in creation, according to Sri Aurobindo. It is in this goal that the future of India as a nation rests. A change of inner and outer life so that the human being becomes a channel of the divine and a fit instrument of God's works. This was how Sri Aurobindo envisioned or how he saw the goal of integral yoga. So the aim of integral yoga is not to create individuals who are immersed in samadhi, who are immersed in bliss, who shunned the world and sought their own liberation, but rather what he truly envisioned was a state where a person becomes a perfect instrument of the divine, completely shorn of all sense of egoity and selfishness, and acting purely on behalf of God. So it is to convert each and every living being into a perfect instrument of the divine to accomplish God's work on earth. That was basically the goal of integral yoga as it was conceived by Sri Aurobindo. Now, there is in fact a double process of evolution, one relating to outer life and one relating to inner life. The discovery of evolution of both realms is basically pivotal to human progress. That is how Aurobindo spoke about it. Now, there are two important life lessons that we can learn from integral yoga. First is that life is basically a series of struggles to outgrow its limitations. Now, this is a very important idea that he has left for posterity. And it is part of Aurobindo's vision for the future of not only of India, but also the entire human race. Because this is something that pertains to the whole of human life. Life, especially human life, not just human life, but even other forms of life, basically represent several struggles on the part of the individual that is alive to outgrow its limitations. Like, for example, we know that we have our senses, our mind, our intellect, but at the same time, we are also endowed with self-consciousness. And it is only because of this self-consciousness that we look back. We reflect back upon ourselves and try to understand in a meta way. I think that would be the best term. In a meta way, we try to understand our own life. Okay, and that actually acquaints us with all the limitations of our personality. Physically, we are limited. All our senses are limited. Intellectually, we have our limitations in several ways. of our ordinary mundane life, we are acutely aware of our limitations. And from time immemorial, human beings have been aware of it. And they have tried to come out of the shell. They have always tried to outgrow their limitations. And another thing is that very often what makes a human life very complicated, which takes away all the peace from us, is what is called as discords between the different dimensions of the human personality. The different dimensions of human personality seem to pull us in different and sometimes opposing directions. And that usually leads to what is called as a wastage of human energy, a dissipation of human energy. Okay, so yoga is that technique that helps you to achieve harmony among the discordant elements of the human personality. So these are two wonderful life lessons that Sri Aurobindo through integral yoga places before us. And finally, because I have to focus more on the vision that was given by Sri Aurobindo, so I'm not going much into the process of integral yoga. I would rather straight jump to the end point, the culmination of integral yoga in the Gnostic being. The end result of integral yoga is the evolution of Gnostic beings. Gnostic beings are situated in perfect knowledge. They are beings consumed by knowledge. The Gnostic being is not a passive being immersed in the bliss of samadhi. It is a being of action, where the action performed is only as the perfect instrument of the divine. So here we find a very, very different and unique concept of a perfected human being. A perfected human being who is not absorbed in the state of samadhi, who is absorbed in the state of bliss or ananda, but rather a person who works tirelessly for the world, who is active all the time, but who performs continuously as a perfect instrument of the divine. Now, the action that is performed by the Gnostic being is believed to be completely shorn of all elements of selfishness and egoity. Now, before we enter into some of the visions that Aurobindo gave for the future of India, it is worthwhile to look into the multifaceted personality of Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo was a yogi, revolutionary, patriot, poet, visionary, and mystic, all rolled into one. As a person who understood the pulse of the Indian nation, Sri Aurobindo regarded the Indian nation not merely as a geographical or political entity, but as a cultural entity that brought together the most perplexing multiplicity into an astounding unity. Spirituality was the cohesive power that was responsible for this unity despite the multiplicity. Sri Aurobindo's vision of a resurgent India. Now I really enter into the great vision that was given by Sri Aurobindo for a resurgent India. Now, infused with a deep spirit of patriotism and commitment to his motherland, Sri Aurobindo has presented to posterity a vision of a resurgent India. In spite of the decadence and dilapidation that Sri Aurobindo witnessed in India at the surface level, he was convinced that it had not percolated down to destroy the spirit of the nation. So he was acutely aware of all the negativities that had entered into the Indian psyche, into the Indian society at large. Okay, like for example, on the one hand, there were problems economically. We were very poor, impoverished, drained, and at the same time, we also had a lot of social evils that mushroomed in the society for many centuries, including the very evil system of caste. So he was acutely aware of all the problems that India faced, and yet he also understood that it had not completely destroyed the very spirit of the Indian nation. Now, all these change, all these challenges basically existed at the surface, and they could be corrected. They could be corrected, and the correction of these the ills that had actually infused into India was sufficient to revive the old ancient India with all its splendor and glory. Now, at the horizon, not very much beyond reach, lay the Renaissance of India. In the text entitled The Renaissance in India, it is a text that I would suggest each one of you to read. A very, very inspiring, visionary text, a very small text. The Renaissance in India, Sri Aurobindo has laid bare the lines along which and the dimensions through which this Renaissance will be realized. Now, a vision for the future that does not attempt to analyze the cause for the current degradation and suggest a solution to it would be utterly utopian. And Sri Aurobindo was acutely aware of it. So, any kind of a vision for a progressive or resurgent India should first begin with an analysis of what went wrong in India. Where did India err as a nation that led to all the negativities that India imbibed into itself? So this analysis is of utmost importance because it is this analysis that gives us a picture of the ground reality. And without taking stock of the ground reality, if we extrapolate anything into the future, it would be merely utopian. And that is the reason why the two denials that were presented by Sri Aurobindo are of immense importance. Sri Aurobindo's analysis of the causes of India's downfall boils down to the two denials that India witnessed over a few centuries. On the one hand, that is what he called as the materialistic denial and the refusal of the ascetic. These were the terms that were used, these were the phrases that were used by Sri Aurobindo. The first is what is called as a materialistic denial. Now, that is a purely materialistic perspective of the universe and of existence. Now, Sri Aurobindo only had deep sympathy for people who completely denied a spiritual domain or an existence that is beyond what was revealed by the senses. He had only deep sympathy for them because he believed that this would close out a very huge dimension of existence that is of utmost importance to human life. So, if you are adamantly holding on to the view that whatever is material alone or whatever is revealed only through the senses and mind that alone does exist, then you are doing a great disservice to yourself by shunning huge dimensions of existence which are of utmost importance even to human life. That is basically what he understood as the materialistic denial. The second is what he called as the refusal of the ascetic. Now, this was an equally worrying tendency that existed in Indian thought. Okay, that is a tendency where you see an overemphasis being laid on asceticism and turning away from the world. Now, it was very well understood that during the 18th and 19th century, especially in the northern parts of India, there was a saying, Mukhamod Jagase ho Adhyatma Patapar. This is a statement that was shared by Swami Rama, where he says that this is a particular idea that ran in the minds of a lot of people. Mukhamod Jagase ho Adhyatma Patapar. That means you turn away from the world and only then can you really be on the path to salvation. Now, we know that most of the modern Indian thinkers, starting from Swami Vivekananda onwards, understood how problematic this was and the kind of harm that this kind of a mindset had caused to the Indian society. Of course, this is the reason why India had all the great scriptures, all the great ideas of equality, of oneness, and yet what was seen practically in the society was all kinds of discrimination, existence of a lot of ignorance of true religious principles, ignorance of the sayings of the scriptures, and religious practices that were deeply rooted in superstition and many evil negative tendencies. How can you discriminate between one human being and another human being when you understand the principle of unity that is spoken by Advaita Vedanta, when you understand that the same reality pervades everything. Okay, so this was the the sad situation, the sad reality that confronted India. On the one hand, you had all the great sayings and the scriptures, and on the other hand, you had a society where more than 95% of the people were completely ignorant of these wonderful principles that were contained in the scriptures, and they formulated a way of life based on ignorance and based on a lot of other principles which had nothing to do with the scriptures, which they held in such high esteem. So that is basically what he called as the refusal of the ascetic. And this tendency he saw beginning with Buddhism. Of course, it was taken over by Advaita Vedanta, and this has caused a lot of disservice to the human mind, according to him. So Sri Aurobindo's philosophy basically attempts to overcome the limitations imposed by them, synthesize whatever is good in both of them, and thereby transcend the limitations of both the materialistic denial and the refusal of the ascetic. Now, moving on, these are some very poignant utterances from Sri Aurobindo, which speaks of a great vision that he had. Now, these are basically words taken from his classic, The Renaissance in India, to which I had referred to earlier. Now, we do not belong to the past dawns, but to the noons of the future. Now, this very statement very clearly indicates that Sri Aurobindo was not a person who held on to the past in a very fanatic way. That is one way in which some people have misunderstood and misinterpreted Sri Aurobindo. That is a person who at every point of time requested you to go back to your roots, go back to the past. So he was certainly not a person who was caught up in the past, but he was a person who stood for absorbing whatever was good and noble from the past, reinventing them in the present, and preparing them for the future. So this is what he basically envisioned. That is why he says that we do not belong to the past dawns, but to the noons of the future. India will certainly keep her essential spirit, her characteristic soul, but there is likely to be a great change in the body. Now, this is also a very profound utterance. Sri Aurobindo believed that there was an essential spirit to India that has withstood all the changes, all the torments that India faced from time to time over millennia. An essential spirit has continued unhindered. And Sri Aurobindo believes that if India has withstood all the torments of the past, India will definitely be able to withstand any challenge that the future may pose before us. And he believed that the essential spirit of India would remain the same. So India would certainly retain her characteristic soul, but there is likely to be a great change in the body. So that indicates that it is a union of change and permanence. It is a coming together of change as well as permanence. There are certain elements that will continue to remain. They will be permanent, and yet at the same time there will be many changes in the future India. Spirituality is the master key of the Indian mind. The sense of the infinite is native to it. So he says that he has repeatedly emphasized on the need for holding on to spirituality. That is our root. And that is something that was pointed out by Gandhiji as well, because Gandhiji used the example of a small plant that is plucked out of the soil. Once the plant has lost touch with the soil, its fate is decided. That is, it is sure to wilt off and die. Similarly, it is absolutely necessary that the Indian psyche be rooted in the soil. And that soil is the soil of spirituality, according to him. And according to him, the sense of the infinite is always native to Indian thought. India saw from the beginning that the physical does not get its full sense until it stands in relation to the supraphysical. So there is never any attempt to belittle or deny or marginalize the physical. Please understand that. In Sri Aurobindo's philosophy, we will never ever see such a trend, such an attempt to belittle or marginalize the physical dimension of existence. But what the only thing that he says is that the physical does not get its full sense until it stands in relation to the supraphysical. That is the only idea that is brought out by him. Now, the need to hold on to India's spiritual heritage was something that was emphasized by him. I would read out this beautiful passage. It would be a tragic irony of fate if India were to throw away her spiritual heritage at the very moment when in the rest of the world there is more and more a turning towards her for spiritual help and a saving light. This must not and will surely not happen. But it cannot be said that the danger is not there. There are indeed other numerous and difficult problems that face this country or will very soon face it. No doubt we will win through, but we must not disguise from ourselves the fact that after these long years of subjection and its cramping and impairing effects, a great inner as well as outer liberation and change, a vast inner and outer progress is needed if we are to fulfill India's true destiny. Very, very poignant words, that speak of the line that India will take in the future. Now, he says for this, what is basically essential is that India was caught up in a particular mold. But something of that mold has to continue. But the mold as it is cannot continue. It is but necessary that this mold is shattered and a new remolding of India is done. Now, a great inner as well as outer liberation and change, a vast inner and outer progress is precisely an agenda for India's resurgence. So that is why he has repeatedly insisted that change has to take place on both dimensions. That is, on the one hand, the physical, social, economic, all these dimensions have to witness huge sea changes. And at the same time, there has to be changes within the human personality as well. The inner life of the human being also has to witness a lot of such change. That is what he meant by the change along the inner and the outer dimensions. In 1909, he wrote in Karma Yogin, I quote, "The spirit and ideals of India had come to be confined in a mold, which, however beautiful, was too narrow and slender to bear the mighty burden of our future. When that happens, the mold has to be broken and even the ideal lost for a while in order to be recovered free of constraint and limitation." So he is ready to give up the ideal, even temporarily, so that we come up with a new mold that is suited to the present times and also suited for the future. The mold is broken. We must remold in larger outlines and with a richer content. Now, he says that the necessity for change in the social fabric is something that we can never close our eyes against. In 1915, Sri Aurobindo remarked to a correspondent of the Hindu thus, "I quite agree with you that our social fabric will have to be considerably altered before long. Our past with all its faults and defects should be sacred to us. But the claims of our future with its immediate possibilities should be still more sacred." See how open-minded Sri Aurobindo was. I am convinced and have long been convinced that a spiritual awakening, a reawakening to the true self of the nation is the most important condition of our national greatness. India, if she chooses, can guide the world. Solving problems in the light of ancient knowledge was something that was emphasized by Sri Aurobindo a lot. India was not to rise for her own sake. I quote, "The spiritual life of India is the first necessity of the world's future. Such is ultimately India's mission. But to fulfill it, that spirit must first create a new body for itself. So, this is the new body, the new society that was envisioned by Sri Aurobindo. India can, and if she will, give a new and decisive turn to the problems over which all mankind is laboring and stumbling. For the clue to their solutions is there in her ancient knowledge. Whether she will rise or not to the height of her opportunity in the Renaissance which is coming upon her is the question of her destiny. So, to the extent to which India would be successful in reclaiming her ancient knowledge, but not exactly as it was in the past, but redefining it, reformulating it, readjusting it to the to face the challenges of the present and the future. To that extent, India's destiny would be secure. So a lot depends on how we endeavor in this particular path. The all-encompassing spirituality. In Sri Aurobindo's concept of spirituality, all aspects of life must be brought under its influence, its regenerative and integrative power. My idea of spirituality has nothing to do with ascetic withdrawal or contempt or disgust of secular things. There is to me nothing secular. All human activity for me is a thing to be included in a complete spiritual life. Unquote. Now, the three epochs in India's growth, as it was given by Sri Aurobindo, is also highly suggestive of the lines along which India should progress into the future. Now, her first period was luminous with the discovery of the spirit. That is what we can essentially see in the Vedas. That is the discovery. It is a quest for truth, a discovery of one's own self that we can see in the ancient Vedic literature. Now, this is what he calls as the discovery of the spirit. Her second completed the discovery of the dharma, that is, the ways and means of living in the society, for infusing this spiritual knowledge into the society to make it progressive, to make it balanced, to make life meaningful. That is what he meant by the discovery of the dharma. Her third elaborated into detail the first simpler formulation of the Shastra, that is the great intellectual heritage that India had. Okay, but none was exclusive. The three elements are always present. India's march to future will carry with it as indispensable these three discoveries of the three epochs. So these three tendencies have to be carried over to the future. They are indispensable for the future India. One is the discovery of the spirit. Second is the discovery of the dharma. And third is the discovery of or the formulation of the Shastra, which basically speaks of the entire intellectual heritage of India. What we may call as both religious or secular, whatever it is, scientific, all that taken together. So these three directions are to be carried forward if India has to witness a renaissance. On national life and religion, divorcing national life from religion has been Europe's historical development and definition of secularism. So, secularism in the sense of divorcing the polity from religion or any touch of religious principles or values was certainly not acceptable to Sri Aurobindo. We know that most of the modern Indian thinkers did not accept this. And that is the reason why even Gandhiji said that instead of the word secularism, what he truly preferred was Sarva Dharma Samabhav. That is a condition where you definitely bring in religious principles and values into life, but then the religious principles and values of all religions were equally welcome. That is what is Gandhiji's Sarva Dharma Samabhav. So this idea of a divorce between polity and spirituality or religion was something which is characteristic of the period of Europe immediately after the Middle Ages. Okay, now that is something that cannot be drafted upon the Indian soil or the Indian psyche, according to Sri Aurobindo. This has resulted in a failure to find deeper values and the actual source of liberty and fraternity beyond both dogmatic religions and shallow humanism. Integration of spirituality in life. A regeneration of India can only begin with a frank rejection of the European concept as unsuited to the Indian temperament and a full acceptance of India's principle of integration of spirituality in life, provided spirituality again does not mean a meditation removed from the worldly affairs. So, when you speak of spirituality, you should never ever return to the tendency of shunning the world. No, we cannot afford to shun the world anymore. We have to infuse spirituality into our worldly life or our worldly affairs. It is a power, and as any other power, it needs instruments. Those are our mind, life, and body. And just as individual yoga involves bringing them under the central rule of the soul or spirit, national resurgence acquires its true meaning when the national mind, life, and body are shaped by the central spirit of the land. Now, the intellectual life of India. India declared that there was nothing that human beings could attain if he trained his will and knowledge. A very important thing. All that we need to do was to train our will and knowledge. And as to what we can achieve in life, sky is the limit. Now, these words also echo the idea of Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda once had said that if I had a child of my own, the only thing that I would teach him or her would be to concentrate. I would just train the person to concentrate. And if the person has the tool of concentration, the person will achieve by himself or herself her or his own destiny. That is what Swami Vivekananda believed. And here, that is the same thing that is echoed by Sri Aurobindo here. He says that what is basically needed is that we need to train our will and our knowledge. And if we are successful in this, then sky is the limit as to what we can achieve in our life. Spirituality itself is not the whole of the Indian mind. When we look at the past of India, what strikes us most is her stupendous vitality, her inexhaustible power of life and joy of life, her almost unimaginably prolific creativeness. Now, the modern Indian philosopher, Professor Dayakrishna, also echoed this view. Dayakrishna felt that on the one hand, when you emphasize spirituality, one should be very, very careful that one does not sideline or marginalize the great intellectual and the creative dimensions of human life in India, because that is of utmost importance. The intellectual power and the creativity of human life that India witnessed also has to be discovered. This is a view that was held by Dayaji. The third power of the ancient Indian spirit was a strong intellectuality, at once austere and rich, robust and minute, powerful and delicate, massive in principle and curious in detail. Now, I'll just touch upon a few more things and then wind up my presentation for today. Next, I'll speak on the system of education, because as Swami Vivekananda said, education is the panacea for all the problems that India faced during that time. Now, the same idea was echoed by Sri Aurobindo. To stimulate original thinking should have been the first task of education in free India. Instead, it retained a perverse system which had been designed to rob Indians of their thinking power. Sri Aurobindo complained that the mental training provided in Indian universities is meager in quantity and worthless in quality. Besides teaching students to think, Sri Aurobindo wanted education to enrich them with their rightful Indian heritage. In India, we have been cut off by a mercenary and soulless education from all our ancient roots of culture and tradition. The full soul, rich with the inheritance of the past, the widening gains of the present, and the large potentiality of the future, can come only by a system of national education. It cannot come by any extensive or imitation of the system of the existing universities with its radically false principles, its vicious and mechanical methods, its dead alive routine tradition, and its narrow and sightless spirit. Only a new spirit and a new body, born from the heart of the nation and full of the light and hope of its resurgence, can create it. Now, here's a beautiful quote from Sri Aurobindo: "The teacher is not an instructor or taskmaster. He is a helper and guide. His business is to suggest and not to impose." And Sri Aurobindo was also a person who believed in what is called as holistic learning. He emphasized a lot on artistic training as well. It is necessary that those who create, whether in great things or small, whether in the unusual masterpieces of art and genius, or in the small common things of use that surround a man's daily life, should be habituated to produce, and the nation habituated to expect the beautiful in preference to the ugly, the noble in preference to the vulgar, the fine in preference to the crude, the harmonious in preference to the gaudy. A nation surrounded daily by the beautiful, noble, fine, and harmonious becomes that which it is habituated to contemplate and realizes the fullness of the expanding spirit in itself. Now, he also had a vision for the Indian polity. To the question, what political system should a resurgent India follow, Sri Aurobindo answered, I quote, "The parliamentary form would be hardly suitable for our people. Of course, it is not necessary that you should have today the same old forms as in ancient India, but you can take the line of evolution and follow the bent of the genius of the race. Parliamentary government is not suited to India, but we always take up what the West has thrown off. In an ideal government for India, there may be one Rashtrapati at the top with considerable powers so as to secure a continuity of policy and an assembly representative of the nation. The provinces will combine into a federation united at the top, leaving ample scope to local bodies to make laws according to their local problems." In India, we had a spontaneous and free growth of communities developing on their own lands. Each such communal form of life, the village, the town, etc., which formed the unit of national life, was left free in its own internal management. The central authority never interfered with it. There was not the idea of interest in India as in Europe. That is, each community was not fighting for its own interest, but has to fulfill in the larger national. But there was the idea of dharma, the function which the individual and the community has to fulfill in the larger national life. There were caste organizations not based upon a religio-social basis as we find nowadays. They were more or less guilds, groups organized for a communal life. There were also religious communities like the Buddhists, the Jains, etc. Each followed its own law, Swadharma, unhampered by the state. The state recognized the necessity of allowing such various forms of life to develop freely in order to give to the national spirit a richer expression. The machinery of the state also was not so mechanical as in the West. It was plastic and elastic. On religious coexistence, a very important topic touched upon by Sri Aurobindo, reciprocity was the key word that defined religious coexistence. Sri Aurobindo agreed to the view of Emperor Ashoka on this. The solution for India's communal problems was formulated long ago by Ashoka himself and may be summarized in 3 simple steps. Do not praise your creed excessively. That is, don't give room for fanaticism. Do not criticize other creeds harshly. Instead, study the positive elements of all creeds. However, in such a vision, there is no scope for religions claiming to be sole repositories of the truth. So this very idea that my religion alone is true and that is the sole repository of truth, that idea has to be completely shunned. Okay. Marginalization of women and India's degradation. Sri Aurobindo always was ahead of his times and regarded the marginalizing of women as a major reason for India's degeneration. Around 1910, He went so far as to envisage that Indian women's superiority to man is no more, I quote, is no more impossible in the future than it was in the far distant past, unquote. A few years later, he asserted, I quote, whenever women have been given opportunity, they have shown their capacity. We have to wait a few generations in order to see them at work, unquote. On conservation of ecosystem, Sri Aurobindo deemed the conservation of the ecosystem, the splendors of nature, as pivotal for general well-being. He said, life is life, whether in a cat or dog or man. There is no difference there between a cat or a man. The idea of difference is a human conception for man's own advantage, unquote. The forest, again, another quote, the forest in India has to be preserved and also the wildlife. On the future that awaits India, I am nearing the end of my presentation. India of the ages, he declares very, very poignant words. India of the ages is not dead. And all that was in India's past is still dormant. It has not been destroyed. It is waiting to assume new forms. That which seeks to awake is not an anglicized Oriental people, docile people of the West, doomed to repeat the cycle of the Occident's success and failure. Finally, I leave you with three great messages that one can see in the classic work, The Renaissance in India. They are three great timeless messages for the future of India. The Renaissance in India gives three visionary messages of Sri Aurobindo for the future of India. They give a definite direction in which a resurgent India must progress. They are, first, the recovery of the old spiritual knowledge and experience in all its splendor, depth, and fullness is its first most essential work. Second, the flowing of this spirituality into new forms of philosophy, literature, art, science, and critical knowledge is the second. Finally, an original dealing with modern problems in the light of Indian spirit and the endeavor to formulate a greater synthesis of a spiritualized society is the third and the most difficult. And this reminds us that we simply cannot parrot some ideas of the past. We have to rediscover many things in our life. And for them, we need to philosophize. Original philosophizing, original reflections are needed. We can draw inspirations from the past, but we have to rediscover them according to the present and also for the future. That is the poignant third instruction that is given by Sri Aurobindo. An original dealing with modern problems. Okay, it is not merely a drafting of some ideas of the past, but it is an original dealing with modern problems in the light of the Indian spirit and the endeavor to formulate a greater synthesis of a spiritualized society is the third and the most difficult. So this sums up Aurobindo's vision for a new India and a resurgent India. Some of the works that I've quoted in this presentation. Thank you, one and all. Thank you for lending me a patient here. Once again, I take this opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to Suresh sir and Suraj sir of History Department, both of whom are very well known to me. They have repeatedly invited me for making presentations and Icpr lectures. I thank them from the bottom of the heart for allowing me to speak and giving me the freedom to speak on a topic that is very close to my heart. Thank you, one and all. I sincerely thank my guide, Professor S. Pannisalam sir, for joining this lecture. I hope he has continued till now. He's still there. Thank you, sir. I feel really honored that you joined. And thank you all the participants for your patient listening. I would be very happy if you have some questions or you have some suggestions or if you have some observations to make about my presentation. Thank you. Over to you, Suresh sir.
Gopika? Gopika? Please ask your doubts and clarify it. Gopika?
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you so much, Vijay sir. And it was a very much engaging session. Thank you, sir. And here, this is a time for discussions. If the participants, any one of the participants have any queries, please mute yourself and raise your doubts, or either type it on the chat box.
I think there are no queries or observations. Anyway, thank you for your for patiently listening to me. Over to you, Suresh sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable and words about me and valuable and wonderful lecture. So it is on YouTube channel. We can this lecture is also on air, so the participants can watch later also. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Gopika.
Next, I would like to invite our distinguished resource person, Dr. T.K. Badrinath, Assistant Professor, Department of Philosophy.
Gopika. Let us start, sir.
Hello, sir. Kindly apologize. May I have some network issues? Am I now audible?
Yes, 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 yes.
And so next, next, I would like to invite Dr. T.K. Badrinath, Assistant Professor, Department of Philosophy, RKM Vivekananda College, Chennai, to have a lecture on the contemporary relevance of the educational philosophy of Rabindranath Tagore. So please.
Thank you very much. Once again, at the outset, I would like to place my thanks to the University College Trivandrum, Department of History, the coordinator of today's program, Dr. Suresh sir, HOD Dr. Suraj sir, faculty members of History Department, all other faculties members from other departments of the university, head of the departments, and all other learned scholars from various other institutions, colleges, and universities, my own department colleagues, Dr. Armugam sir and Nagaraj sir, and my department students, and last but not the least, my guide, our guide to be precise, Paneerselvam sir. Honor to be presenting a paper before you, sir. And to all the learned audience, learned research scholars, I place my humble pranams. And I would like to share my presentation. Yes. Window. Sir, is the
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's
visible?
visible,
Yes.
sir. So,
Thank you, sir. Yes. So my topic would, as it is there, the contemporary relevance of educational philosophy of Rabindranath Tagore. Before I go on to it, I should say that after listening to Vijay's lecture, lot of similarities, lot of overlappings will be there, because all contemporary thinkers have more or less they share the same ideas regarding education. And so if you had observed Vijay sir's lecture, you can see a lot of repetition will also be there in Tagore. I shall move on with the presentation. So the introduction, you all know that Tagore was born on 6th May 1861 to Devendranath Tagore and Sharada Devi. He was the youngest son of a family of 13. To his parents, he was fondly called as Rabi. He was married to Mrinalini Devi. They had 5 children, and the last was I think Devendranath Tagore or something. He received his education mostly at home. I start from here. He received his education mostly at home through tutors and private readings, which he did not approve of. From the childhood days, you can trace that Tagore was not happy with the existing system of education, and he did not enjoy the system education which as a child, he wanted to enjoy. That's the point I'm trying to drive here first. He was against the monotonous rote and beaten tracks of learning. As a result, he was unhappy and did not enjoy his childhood days. The most memorable days, the sweetest part of one's life is one's childhood days, where you remember your friends, recollect your schooling days. And I'm afraid Rabindranath Tagore did not had a very fruitful schooling days. So what he did, he considered himself to be fortunate to have escaped. Look at his words. He considered himself to be fortunate to have escaped from such a kind of learning or education system. Thank God I did not had to study or undergo the torture, which later we will see how his views on education, how he expresses them. So he says he was fortunate enough to have escaped such a kind of education system. So how much he should have been affected, because as a child, and my presentation would be more from education towards the child, what a child gets. Then his father sent him to England to study law. Even the foreign system of education failed to attract him or make any impact on him. So he returned back to India. And therefore, in India also, he did not enjoy his schooling. Even in abroad, when he went abroad in foreign countries also, he was not satisfied with the education. So he returned back to India, and therefore he wanted to reform or do something with the existing education which did not appeal to him. He had a passion for education that he was instrumental in setting up his own school in the year 1901 at Bolpur, a city in West Bengal. He wanted to make education dynamic, active, and interesting for children. I again repeat, he wanted to make education dynamic, active, and interesting for children. My presentation is more focused on education for children. So how today you all know that Sunday comes, Monday morning means no child likes to go to the school. Tomorrow, oh my God, I have to go to the school. That should not be the attitude of the child. They must be eager, loving, waiting forward to go to the school, but that was not the case. So he wanted to make education like that. Make children, they must love to go to the school. He had a passion for education that he was instrumental in setting his own school in the year 1901. Yes, in Bolpur. He wanted to make education something dynamic, active, and interesting for children so that it will appeal to them. In the year 1921, he was instrumental in setting the world famous Central University, Vishwa Bharati, which was earlier known as Shanti Niketan Ashram. Tagore was awarded the Nobel Prize for Gitanjali in the field of literature in the year 1931. He was awarded a honorary degree of D.Litt in December 1913. He was also conferred with the knighthood, which was considered to be extremely prestigious, given by the foreign country. Not all would be knighted, which was considered to be both extremely precious and prestigious in the year 1951. After his yeoman service in the fields of literature, multi-talented, versatile genius, as I told, lot of points of what Vijay told or of Aurobindo would be reflecting in Tagore and which will be reflecting in Vivekananda. It's bound to happen because they were all great personalities. Literature, philosophy, education, arts, left. His impact on these fields were immense, but he left this mortal world on 7th August 1941. By then, through Tagore, India had given a very strong message to mankind, especially in the field of education. Let us see his views on education. Education for Tagore should help in the overall development of the personality of the child to its maximum possible extent, bringing out the best of the child. Education for Tagore should bring out the best out of the child, bring his potential to the maximum, realize the child's talents, capabilities, capacities to the maximum extent. Such should be the aim of education. The aim of education lies in the harmonious coexistence with all things. Life is to be lived in its entirety in order to be enjoyed. Tagore considered education to be an expensive affair. I again underline this word. Tagore considered education to be an expensive affair which only a very few could afford and enjoy. So education must be connected with human life. It should reach the common man, the masses. It should be helpful in solving human problems. They should be able to solve their problems. They should be able to stand on their own foot. Like Vivekananda said, that education is the manifestation of perfection already in man. Education should be man-making. Vivekananda told, these points will keep overlapping as I told you in the beginning itself. Please again note his views on education. It should not be a painstaking, cruel treatment as given in the hospitals to cure the problems of patients. I can't help but laugh because you would just go imagine yourself to be a child and his views on education towards the children. The moment you say you go to school, no children likes to go, but he wants to make a change in that. So then Tagore was a very strict academician. His views have either directly or indirectly created a tremendous impact in various contexts. Tagore believed that a strong body only could have a strong mind and vice versa. You need to have a strong body. Your physical, you must have a strong body. Yes. Vivekananda also, I am time and again reminded of Vivekananda who told that you play football and you can reach heaven because your concentration levels, your passion. Only a strong body should have a strong mind, and a strong mind should have a strong body. He therefore gave great importance to the overall physical development of the body in the early stages of childhood. Time and again, I'm reminding you, dear viewers, that I'm talking about the education given to children. So a child who is not fed properly or who is not having a strong body can never concentrate. I'm again reminded of Vivekananda's quotation, don't preach religion to a hungry man. Or I don't believe in a religion which does not provide a loaf of bread to an orphan's mouth or wipe the tears of a widow. So you first make your body strong, then only you can have a strong mind. Yet at the same time, he equally encouraged and stressed the need for the development of the faculty of thinking, imagination, creativity in the mind of the child. He similarly, at the same time, he gave total freedom to the development of the child's imagination, creativity, and the intellectual aspect also. Tagore was a man of principles and morality. He greatly emphasized on values. He focused on inner disciplines, ideals of peace, and advocated a simple way of living. Simple way of living. I again underline that word, read it. A simple way of living. He condemned slavery of any kind, be it physical or spiritual. He was also against the practice of blind superstitions, prejudices, outmoded traditions, customs, and practices. And next, we move on to the contents of education. For Tagore, education, you see how unhappy his childhood days were, how unhappy he was with the foreign system of education. He returned back. He wanted to, he established his own school, and then he wanted to serve the children and make a schooling a very happy and a place to look forward to rather than cutting a very sorry figure or sorry face. See, if you see Tagore's views on his curriculum was not based on any subjects to be learned. No need to learn any subjects, because the moment you say you read history, geography, physics, chemistry, maths, biology, the child will automatically show his or her disinterest in learning subjects. So what Tagore did, he wanted subjects he was against bookish learning. As you can see, he was against bookish learning. Anybody can learn from books. Even today, now, I am not needed to be present to educate you or give a talk about Tagore. You can all refer Google. There is always, the net is the source of information available everywhere. And books, so you need not even follow any books. Everything is available. The role of teacher is slowly diminishing. He was against bookish learning and therefore emphasized on the study of language, literature, music, arts, and nature. These were the views, especially when I listened to the talk of Vijay. His views on system of education will be same as that of Tagore. On teaching, it will also be very similar. On arts and artistic training, about what Vijay told, you will see the repetition or the similarities again coming into. You can see those same views will be reflected in Tagore's philosophy of education also. As seen, so music, literature, arts, study, and he always wanted the child to be related with nature. He was against teaching in closed walls in a classroom where you lock the rooms and you just, rote learning, or you lock the rooms and learning in classrooms. Not that. Let the boys or the children learn in nature, in free air. Let them be with part of nature. Then learning will be a more interesting, fruitful process, because time and again I'm telling you, it is education meant for children, how to make it more attractive, appealing, interesting for children. Education should be activity based. He was against bookish knowledge, bookish learning. We have already seen that. So it must be activities based. See, like dancing, dramatics, painting, drawing, handwork, excursions. Will any child say, I am not interested tomorrow we are going to an excursion? How many of you are coming? Class strength will be to 20. All the 20 will be raising their hands. Handwork, drawing, painting, anything which allows them the freedom to develop their talents. Music, arts, as told by Vijay, is similarly encouraged in Tagore's contents of education. Education must be activity based. And community service and living in Shanti Niketan, life was fully practical and service oriented. Everyone was a member and had to render service. As seen before again, education should be related to man's life. It should not be something abstract. Education must help in solving everyday's problems or should make a person stand on his own legs. It is something concrete and must cover all aspects of one's life: economic, intellectual, aesthetic, social, spiritual dimensions. Now I move on to the methods of teaching. I think I am reminded of my professor Armugam sir, who time and again says, you don't judge a student by just his marks, just by what he does in the class or reproducing your notes or your answers. It is not the yardstick for measuring the intelligence of a child, of a student. He says you should encourage him and allow him to learn something. Learning something is education, not reproducing something is education. So now coming to Tagore's methods of teaching, he was against the traditional methods of classroom teaching. Yes, I told you in the beginning itself, classroom methods, monotonous. I repeat, I was very much listening when Vijay told, I repeat the word see, that he was very sad to see the pitiable state of education, which was completely lifeless, colorless, and was based on the beaten tracks of learning. Similar words were echoed when Vijay presented his paper. Again, these words are coming. Lifeless. Education was completely no life in it, no color. I mean, how much Tagore would have been affected if he's writing like this? How the child, you go to your childhood days and you imagine yourself to be a child, and then you talk about education. You will be more interested in this PowerPoint presentation. I hope so. He wanted to make education to take place in a natural atmosphere. Yes, instead of a classroom, closed walls, indoors, you go take them to a beach, park. It must be based on activities and see teaching in open air. Students, you can walk along with them, have a discussion, travel, journey, excursions, picnics, and education need not be inside classrooms. You can just walk away, walk in a park, discuss. Those times I'm reminded of the Vienna Circle, which my Paniswaram sir used to say. Discussions were held in open places. Public gatherings were there. No closed classrooms. So, see, he encouraged novels like Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe, I think, which we had all read in childhood days. That chapter or that topic or that English lesson would capture our attention because it was filled full with adventures of Robinson Crusoe. That chapter would be, I mean, most students would love to remember the chapter, and I still remember being that part of my syllabus because it was, as Tagore has time and again said, education should be activity based, not the rote, monotonous, beaten tracks, colorless, lifeless. No, not like that. It is something which a student should participate in the class, not as a child should not be a passive spectator. He should actively engage himself in the class. So what you should do for making students actively participate in the class, make it more colorful, encourage tours, encourage syllabus like Robinson Crusoe. He also encouraged excursions, tours, which should attract children and thus make education more interesting, productive, and creative. Identified three main sources of knowledge, namely nature, life, and teacher. So the main three sources of knowledge where from children learn. They learn from nature, they learn from life, and the teacher. There must be a harmony among all these three things. Children learn a lot from nature, which is the unseen educator. Which is the unseen educator. Which is the unseen educator. Yes, he says, children get knowledge through direct experience when they come in contact with nature. When they come in contact with nature, they get direct knowledge. He also advocated activity-based methods of learning and encouraged discussions. Exactly, when you leave the child, go play around or go to a beach or a park, it learns. You need not say that experiencing something is different from preaching. Practical knowledge is best than theoretical knowledge. That's what Tagore emphasizes here again, time and again. His methods of teaching. Yes, now I move on to his views on discipline. Again, see, he gave a free hand to children. I am time and again repeating that it's based for children's education. How to make education attractive for children. Discipline should not be, it must be something self-imposed. The aim lies in complete freedom which the child enjoys. It should just love to come to the school, love to take part in a class, love to attend a professor's class or a madam's class or a teacher's class, and not shun away or shy away, run away, avoid, or come back home, which is the ultimate joy for a child. No, that should not be the case. So Tagore was against the child should be given freedom in all aspects, in all respects. Tagore was against imposing strict discipline on children. Yes, if you come late, I will punish you. No, children are children. You must have a sympathy for them. Yes, that's what is the next point. Yes, you must sympathize with the child. The child should not be suppressed by any form of power, dominance, or authority. The moment you say a teacher's name, if the child starts crying or no, not her class, not his class, which means the child is afraid to attend a class of a particular person. It should not be the case. So it should not be suppressed by any form of authority. Children should be given complete freedom. You come, enjoy, play. And there are schools like this, which like the theater, I mean the school in Besant Nagar, where I think the education is completely left to the children's choice. They can attend the school if they want, attend the class. They are just allowed to. If not interested, they can just walk away. A school is there in Besant Nagar. I think it's the school called as the school. Yes, he acts, guides. So, what is the role of the teacher then? If everything is child can learn by itself. Again, when I listened to Vijay's lecture, it was same. The teacher acts only to stimulate the activities. He is just he must guide, motivate, and stimulate the child. The child will automatically start learning. You just be a spark. You ignite a spark. The child will automatically learn. The teacher has to provide the spark. That is the main role of the teacher. So now I move on to Tagore's views on teacher. Tagore placed teacher at the highest pedestal. He compared him to the guru who removes darkness or ignorance of pupil. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful quotation which I enjoyed. He who has lost the child in himself is unfit for the great work of educating the children. I repeat, he who has lost the child in himself. Inside every person, there is a child. Inside me, inside a 60-year-old man, inside a 40-year-old man or a woman. Not necessarily that a child should be a child only when it is a child. Even when you are grown up, when you meet your college friends or when you meet, suppose, an alumni gathering of your old batchmates, my father's batchmates reunion, when they share their school days, they become like child. There must always be a child inside you. If the childish attitude or is not inside you, there's something drastically wrong. I am reminded of Wordsworth, who used to say that child is the father of man. William Wordsworth, if I'm right, his quotation was, child is the father of man. Child grows, learns, becomes the father, then he becomes the father of man, again he becomes child. So child is the father of man, says William Wordsworth. I'm reminded of him. A teacher must have a receptive mind. If the students or the children want to express something, don't suppress them. No, this is not right. Please follow what I say. Never do that. Have a receptive mind and a desire to learn always. As we all know that a teacher never stops to learn. Once he stops, then he is not a teacher. We still learn. We learn, we keep learning. Learning is a continuous process. A teacher can never really teach unless he is still learning. He is compared to a lamp. A lamp can never light another lamp unless it continues to burn itself. Yes. The teacher guides and directs the activities of the child based on the interests and inclinations. So whatever the child likes, whatever he or she likes, the role of the teacher is to encourage such activities and follow the pursuit of the child, interest and pursuits of the child. He must be considerate. Must know and understand the psychology of the child. Go back to the schooling days, my dear friends. He must be considerate. Okay, today you have come late, it's all right. After all, you are a child. Child does not do anything wantedly. His views on teacher, yes, the child. Then we move on to Shantiniketan. It was started in the year 1901, but later became an international university in the year 1921. It was created for three main purposes: to teach the different cultures of the East, that began particularly in India, to establish the Institute of Rural Reconstruction, which paved the way for a happy and contented life in the village, to promote intercultural harmony between the East, West, by arriving at a common understanding, resulting in the unification of mankind. With these fundamental principles, Shantiniketan functioned like an ashram with simplicity and a calm, peaceful atmosphere. So he was instrumental in starting Shantiniketan. All these things, see how from a childhood days, if you are not happy with the system of education, how it has affected till you grow or become a man. Such a horrid time Tagore faced during his schooling days that he was instrumental in setting up Shantiniketan or Vishwabharati later, as we will see. The three main constituents of Vishwabharati University, which are Shantiniketan school itself is a part of the university itself, and the Institute of Rural Reconstruction. These are the three main constituents of the University of Vishwabharati, which is a central university, as you all know. There are also other departments like what are all encouraged. Apart from, you will see, not from normal curriculum subjects, no. The Vidya Bhavan, School of Research, yes, studies also is important. Vidya Bhavan, Shiksha Bhavan College, Pata Bhavan School, Kala Bhavan, music, dance, Shilpa Bhavan School of Industries, Vinaya Bhavan Teachers College, Hindi Bhavan, Islamic Research Section, and others were there, part of Shantiniketan's various departments and schools, where people from West could come, and learn here and study here. The university symbolizes the relationship between the East and the West. So the starting point, why Vishwabharati was established, to create a relationship between the East and the West. It acted as a bridge so that people from West could come here, learn the tradition, the cultures, the glorious heritage of India. And what can we learn from the Westerners? The science, the technology, and the current trends happening. So West is always ahead of us in terms of science and technology. We are always ahead in West in respect to religion, tradition, practices, culture, those things they learn from here and we could learn from there. So for this, Vishwabharati acted as a perfect bridge. Classes at Vishwabharati were held in open air. Wonderful students would relish to go to such classes. Even today, left to myself, if you ask my son or daughter, where would you like to study, or any children for that matter, in a school closed atmosphere where or in an open ground free air, in tune with nature, they would, I think, 9 out of 10 would prefer to go and have a beautiful outside view of the world. Even when sitting in the class, we still see our own students gazing outside at nature, which means there's an intimate connection between us and nature. It is an indispensable part. So there's a child in you again. You are wondering at the crow, you are gazing at the flowers blooming outside our classrooms, or you are attracted towards some other scenery, which is very, 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 very natural. Classes at Vishwabharati were held in open air. Students can freely express their thoughts and ideas. It tries to serve the needs of the poor, downtrodden masses. Thus, Tagore made Vishwabharati a center of international learning where India could give a message to humanity as a whole. Now, to make some justification on my topic or as a formality, conclusion, Tagore was a philosopher. You can see the multi-dimension or multi-faceted personality how Tagore was. Again, in the conclusion, while Vijay concluded, he concluded by saying that all these things were possessed by Aurobindo. Similarly, all great philosophers, all great Indian thinkers, be it Vivekananda, Tagore, or Aurobindo, see, he was a poet, novelist, dramatist, composer, educator, and above all, a prophet. Naturally, one who serves the people. He revived the spirit of ancient India. He was a saint, a guru, and a rishi. In the field of literature, he was an inspiration to several writers in various languages. His love for the masses, children, and for the entire humanity went beyond borders, boundaries, countries. Yes, naturally, all great personalities, their influence goes beyond boundaries. Like I'm reminded, every philosopher inhales much before he exhales. Every philosopher is an effect. You learn, you take whatever is, you take more from what has been said. You inhale much before you exhale. Huh? His love for the masses, children, and for the entire humanity went beyond boundaries and borders. He was the one who visualized that by bringing a synthesis. So why this synthesis? Why should this happen? Let Western world be Western, Indian world be Indian. So what? He could have left at that. But why the need for Vishwabharati, the synthesis between the East and West? He thought by bringing, if I can understand the religion, if I can understand the way your life, your culture, your practices, your customs, your traditions, then there will be harmony. Always our next door neighbor is our villain, or we never coexist together. Tagore talked about harmonious coexistence. Always our friends or the neighbors next door, we never go on well. Why? Because we fail to understand them. It's in a very, very narrow sense I'm talking. But see, imagine bringing together, understanding your way, your lifestyle, your culture. If I can understand a tribal culture, say for example, the way African tribes live, how they say, I wish, I greet my professor by saying good morning. Japanese, it's a different style. Chinese, it's a different style. In tribal culture, it's different style. If I understand their way of culture, the way they life functions, if there's a synthesis between both my tradition and your tradition, then all problems would be solved. Why we are now Ukraine attack on Russia? There is no synthesis, there is no understanding, there is no common agreement. India, Pakistan, you name any international problem, because there was no synthesis between the East and the West. This was seen several decades by Tagore. A synthesis between the East and West would solve the problems of the world. He was a versatile genius. Naturally, thinker, philosopher, artist, painter, and a musician. He was not only a nationalist and a patriot, but also an internationalist par excellence whose most outstanding contribution lied in the form of Vishwa Bharati. I once again thank you one and all for your patient listening, and I hope I have done some justification to the topic. With this, I conclude my presentations. I thank the organizers and all the learned scholars who are present here for their patient listening and hearing. Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. My special thanks to Vijay, who was also instrumental in making me talk today. Thank you, one and all. Any doubts or clarifications, I would be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, sir, for your enlightening words. Now it's time for discussion. If anyone of you have any queries, please do unmute yourself and ask, or you can type them in the chat box.
When we are talking about Indian philosophers' contribution to education, like Tagore, Vivekananda, Aurobindo, lot of points will be overlapping. Great personalities, yes, they express the same thing in different ways. That's all. So it's just understanding, or more to put it in Paneerselvam sir's, it's hermeneutical. Yes, you understand it differently, what each person says. Or when language becomes a very important mode of communication, if you fail to understand. I thought I could be also bilingual, but since it's a national seminar and the mode of communication would be in English, it would be better. Mother tongue or some here and there quotations could have been in other languages, but say most of the problems can be solved when understanding is possible. When language goes on holiday, you fail to understand. Wittgenstein says that when the engine of language is idling and not. I hope my communication language was not a barrier in any. Yes. I was about to say yes, Rousseau. You see similar views in Pestalozzi. Heinrich Pestalozzi, a Swiss educational reformer, was also very similar. His views were very similar to that of he was the first one who introduced picture books, story books, to make studies or education more attractive. How would you like to read? Would you like to read a bunch of big book, every line written, or would you like to read a book where there is a pictures, or would you like to read a book where there is color pictures? A child would always love to read a book with pictures, animated pictures, colorful pictures, painted pictures with little wordings, not a book, say what we read, just containing black and white pages. Jeevan, I think Pestalozzi and Herbart, who are contributing in the Western philosophical world about education, they also shared similar views with what Tagore has echoed. I mean, all great personalities would be sharing, because they inhale much before they exhale. The saying goes like that. Thank you, Jeevan. Thank you. I hope again I had done some justification to the topic. from a education to a child's point of view, views of Tagore. Because one of the very important thing is communication. Yes, once you fail to understand the language medium of communication, you won't have any doubts, or you will be having a lot of doubts. When language goes on holiday, we enter into philosophical problems, or philosophical problems cannot be solved, or but rather dissolved. Sir, yes, sir. Suresh, sir, I have completed what I wanted to say. It's left to you, sir. Thank you.
Once again, thank you, sir.
Yes.
Another question is to come.
Do Tagore and Vivekananda have there will be a lot of similarities and there will be differences, because the similarities will be there, and also they would be slightly differing in from. I mean, it's I should not say this, but there are a lot of similarities. There will also be differences, because whatever, after listening to Vijay's lecture, a shade or 30% of my lecture would have been common in between myself and Vijay regarding, because I have especially noted his views on system of education is very similar, on teaching will be similar, on arts, artistic training, whatever Vijay sir told about Aurobindo holds good for Tagore also. What holds good for Vivekananda, what Tagore wanted to make education so that it can child can stand on its own legs. Man making education was the concept of Vivekananda. There will be a lot of overlapping things, but yet at the same time they will be maintaining their identity separately. Yes, they will be having their own views also, but great philosophers will share a lot of things common. Yes, nothing wrong in being common, and yet at the same time being different. At least in some point, you have to say what I want to say, and my understanding is different from your understanding, or my perspective of seeing a problem, or my perspective or my view of seeing a thing is different from yours. Understanding is understanding only if we understand in a different way. I am reminded of Gadamer's quotation here. He says that you understand something only when you understand it differently. If what I understand after reading a book, say Bible or Bhagavad Gita or X, Y, Z, any book, I read, I understand it, and it is the same way what Vijay has understood, and he has repeated the same thing, then there is no difference between my understanding and his understanding. It has to be something different. That understanding process, the process of understanding should be different. I hope you all would have got your own understanding of what I said, not my views on what I said. After listening to my lecture, your own understanding about my lecture.
If there is some more time, I can.
Please, you can add our supplements, sir, to my lecture points.
Can I talk?
Please, sir. Please, sir.
Okay. Dr. Vijay is there?
Vijay?
Vijay has left, I think. As a research supervisor of these two great...
I'm very much here, sir. I'm very much here. I hope I'm audible.
As a research supervisor of these two great scholars, I would like to make a few observations. Of course, my observations are to complement their beautiful presentation. To start with Professor Vijay's excellent presentation on Sri Aurobindo, I'm happy that Dr. Vijay could cover the entire philosophical discourse of Sri Aurobindo's new vision for India. I would say that he has covered almost all the points in Aurobindo's thought, starting from the integral yoga, and then he has discussed the theory of evolution in evolution, and then he has also talked about making a passing remark to feminism, which Aurobindo was thought of, which he was talking about, and also the environmental issues which he has discussed. So I am very happy with the presentation of Vijay, Professor Vijay, for making this excellent presentation. And one significant point which he has touched upon is how Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo was not all the time relating himself to the tradition. As Vijay has very rightly pointed out, he said that there are some good aspects of tradition which we have to cherish, which we have to inculcate. But at the same time, we have to go to the present and also to the future. So he was not tied down to the past as because it is past. This is something very, very important, and Vijay has very beautifully has pointed out this thing. And two denials. This is also very important aspects which Professor Vijay has touched upon. This is two denials he has pointed out: the materialistic denial as well as the refusal of the aesthetic. So these are two important points which most of our philosophers could follow. In the sense that in Indian tradition, there is what is called the materiality of the spirit and the spirituality of the matter. Both are available in Sri Aurobindo. That is uniqueness of Sri Aurobindo's thought. Because in Sri Aurobindo, we see there is acceptance of both body as well as mind, the spirit as well as matter. Because this is a conflict. I mean, for the Westerners, for the Western thinkers, there is always a conflict between matter and spirit, or they consider one as superior and the other as inferior, and that was the main reason for Derrida and others criticizing this bipolar concepts. But in Sri Aurobindo, as very rightly pointed out by Dr. Vijay, that you can see how the materiality is not completely denied. Not completely denied. It is accepted. For example, if you take his theory of evolution, you see how it starts from matter. So this aspect is very important, and in fact, perhaps one can say this is a unique contribution of Sri Aurobindo. Though there are many Western thinkers who spoke about evolution, like Darwin, Karl Marx, Samuel Alexander. Many scholars talk about evolution theory, but the uniqueness of Sri Aurobindo is that he has discussed in evolution also. This is something very remarkable, and perhaps we can say this is a uniqueness of Indian philosophical tradition, and the credit goes to Sri Aurobindo, and the credit goes to Dr. Vijay for exhibiting that in a very beautiful way. So I have one small question. It is not a question. I'm very, very curious to know from him, because he's a very great exponent of Sri Aurobindo. Because whenever I think of Aurobindo, then immediately Vijay comes to my mind, because he thoroughly, I know how hardworking he was when he was a research scholar, very committed scholar. So perhaps he can explain or clarify this doubt which always occurs to me. Because sometimes it is said when Aurobindo is talking about the super mind, which is something very, very interesting, it is sometimes compared to the Superman of Nietzsche. So do you find any similarity between these two? This is what I would like to know from you. Perhaps you can throw some light on this.
Definitely, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Actually, sir, the Superman, as it was conceived by Sri Aurobindo, is what is displayed through the Gnostic being. And that culmination is what is called as the Gnostic being there, a being of light. what is common, I feel, between the Superman of Nietzsche is the transcendence of all kinds of dichotomies. Because, the value systems imposed by religion, especially of Christian religion, were sought to be transcended in Nietzsche's concept of the Superman, as I understand it. And many such binaries were overcome in the notion of the Superman, or transcended in the notion of the Superman. Now, in the case of Aurobindo, there is, of course, the transcendental dimension, but Aurobindo also would like to take the multiplicity, or the immanence is very much a part and parcel of the transcendence in the case of Sri Aurobindo. Because never for once has Aurobindo said that any kind of transcendence would happen by ignoring a dichotomy or ignoring the multiplicity. And that is where he even comes into conflict with some perspectives of Advaita also. So in that sense, I believe that there are points of convergence, but also there are also points of divergence between the two thinkers also. Because I think it is not really in a metaphysical sense that Nietzsche speaks of his Superman, but there is certainly a metaphysical dimension to the Gnostic being and the Superman, and even the state of the supermind as it was conceived by Sri Aurobindo. That is what I feel, sir.
Vijay. See, in Savitri,
Sir, can you unmute yourself, sir? You're mute. Yeah.
in Savitri, Sri Aurobindo talks about two important concepts. One is the ethics of care. One can develop the Indian femininity from it. That is his contribution. Okay. And the second important notion which has developed in Savitri is the environmental ethics, wherein it is said that many Western thinkers like Arrhenius, though they have discussed this in detail, it is in Aurobindo we find a full-fledged form of environmental ethics. And do you find these two concepts in other writings of Sri Aurobindo, for example, the life divine?
Yeah, sir, not just life divine, because as if you take the life divine or the synthesis of yoga, it is a complete mapping of the spiritual life of an individual right from the time when a person starts inquiring into the nature of truth or inquiring into the nature of oneself to the culmination of the process. That entire thing is covered there. And I think in the ideal of eco-philosophy or ecosophy, as you touched upon in Savitri, that finds repercussions again in the secret of the Veda. Works like the secret of the Veda, the hour of God, these works definitely shed more light on his the kind of ecological balance that he spoke about and what he saw in the Vedas. Because according to him, this idea of this ecological unity, the ecological balance that he could discern from Savitri, that is something that he understood from the Vedas itself. The entire Vedic philosophy is one that balances both. That is, there is a balance of the male and the female. There is equality of the male and the female, as well as there is equality of the human being and the rest of the living beings, the rest of the animal and the plant kingdom. So everything is taken together there. There are many other works. I definitely remember having read some references to it in works like The Hour of God, The Secret of the Veda, etc. Many of them. And of course, the human being in relation to the world outside is touched upon as a part and parcel of the spiritual progress in works like The Synthesis of Yoga and The Life Divine.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay, for your very nice exposition. I am grateful to you for your very nice presentation, as well as the way in which you have answered some of my things. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Now, with regard to Dr. Badri's very nice presentation, like that of Vijay, I really congratulate you for making this wonderful presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Though Rabindranath Tagore is not your PhD topic, I am happy that you have worked in detail so that you could present a very beautiful discourse on Rabindranath Tagore.
Not exhaustive, sir. Whatever I could do.
Okay. I have a few questions or once again observations. Now with regard to Dr. Rabindranath Tagore, you have very rightly pointed out that he was more concerned about bringing out the perfection of man, which is already there. Now, the other concept which is very important while discussing the concept of education is the surplus in man.
Okay, sir.
Surplus in man is something. It is a nucleus point for Rabindranath Tagore. So, keeping these two aspects at the backdrop, I would like to know from you, because you have worked on this in detail, how far this value-based education is followed in our curriculum. This is general questions.
Unfortunately not, sir. Unfortunately not. The value-based education, yes, it is. We are being given a class, we have allotted hours, value-based education. How far it is being put into practice? My answer is, I have to say, I have to cut a very sorry face. Yes, sir. How far it is being put? These ideas of an open air classroom where you interact with the teacher or the guide in a very friendly, open atmosphere, not closed classroom environment, discussions, tours, active participations, seminars, conferences like that. Then you go to excursions, picnics. Education should be held in open air, activity based, not in closed classrooms. How far it is being put into practice? I'm sorry, sir. Even today, now we are being restricted by syllabus. We have been restricted by time, restricted by hours, class. We don't have a free hand, or the child does not have the freedom to choose what it wants to do, or the student does not have the freedom to just walk away from a class lecture, which might be followed in Western countries, as you have pointed out, sir. In great persons taking class, you have the freedom to either sit or you can just walk away. But such kind of freedom where the child has the inherent, the capabilities, the capacities which it wants to realize. If it wants to realize, it must be given a complete free hand in education, sir. The surplus then only can be realized or whatever. Okay. How far it is put into practice in today's education? I'm sorry, sir. I have to go with the coexisting system of education, which is still the Macaulay system of education. What we follow, we don't have the Gurukula system where the child goes at a very young age, gets knowledge. Here you are graded by attendance, hours, and marks based and not knowledge based.
Correct. Yeah, you're right. Now, in your talk, you made a reference to the Shantiniketan, now it is the Vishwabharati University. Now, in the Shantiniketan, the primary aim of Rabindranath Tagore is to promote naturalism. That's one yes. thing he was more concerned. Yes. And the second concept which he was interested in, internationalism. Yes. And third is idealism. Right? Now, this first, let us take one point, namely naturalism. Now, the main aim of Rabindranath Tagore is that the environment.
Education should be related to the environment, in nature, in a natural surroundings.
Classes during his time were conducted in open spaces, under the trees and all that one. But if you had gone to this place, Shantiniketan, then now it is closed walls only. So we are not following the concept of education which he has suggested for us. And secondly, I would like to state that there are many, you also pointed out that there can be many parallels which one can draw between his thought and many of the contemporary philosophers' thought, like Sri Aurobindo, Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda, J. Krishnamurti also.
JK school, the school. Yes, sir.
It's school, yeah. But all these philosophers have given some guidance for our rulers.
Way to function.
Yeah.
But whether it is functioning or not.
Yeah. But why we are not following them? Still, we are following the Western type of education or westernized form of education, which is damaging us too much.
Yes.
So, what is your view regarding that?
Sir, I would be happy if you can give your view, sir. I am facing the same problem. Sir, I do face the same problem. So they are given the guidelines, they are given, but why we are not following? I wish education is open air, where I even mentioned the Vienna circle, which you used to say when sitting, Karl Popper and others, the logical positivists used to sit. Such should be education. Just relaxation. You just talk, discuss on various contemporary issues. You also mentioned when the Twin Tower blast, all philosophers have a social responsibility in anything which is happening around the world.
Correct.
Social philosophers must go in and participate. You cannot be just a spectator, passive. You don't take a back seat. So they are given the way, but why we are not? Same thing you told that now Shantiniketan classes are now closed to atmosphere. Yes, these things, why they are not happening? I would be happy if you can say, sir. I wish it happens, but at time passes, there are very few schools, I think, and there are education will be a very expensive an affair if you can go where the child's talent can be promoted to its maximum extent. There are some international schools, right? Where you are allowed to the school. There is no uniform, nothing. The child can go play whichever talent, whichever capability, or whichever aspect it wants to develop. It can develop its full potentiality with complete freedom. With complete freedom, as Tagore wished.
Correct.
But why times are? I mean, still we are just following the old beaten tracks. I repeat the word colorless, lifeless education, which he told. We are still following that.
Okay. Yeah.
Sir, also that is, there are schools in Indonesia, actually in Bali, where this is really put to practice. I've heard a lot about that, where in a very natural, almost like a forest environment, the children learn naturally. Many people who visited Bali say that the schools in Bali, where there is an open environment, where the philosophy of education is one of naturalism, that is something to witness. It is something that is really worthy. It is so heartening to observe how the children, in a very carefree way, they develop it. And I saw that, sir, also in Aurobindo. When I had been to Aurobindo in 2004 during my research days, that is also an environment where without any kind of restrictions or any kind of impositions, the children are free to learn and develop. And sir, I'd just like to add one point regarding your early question, that is regarding the Superman. I believe I missed that, so I thought I should add that. That is, in the concept of Aurobindo's concept of the Superman and in Nietzsche's concept of Superman, there is a very important converging point. And that converging point, I believe, is that in both the cases, the Superman gives the opportunity for the individual to develop the individual's creativity as well as potentials to the maximum extent. Nietzsche also vehemently speaks of his Superman as a condition where the potentiality is developed to the maximum. The creativity is developed to the maximum, and Aurobindo is also a person who believed that in the state of the Gnostic being, that is in the condition of the supermind, the person's creativity is at its peak, or it is in a full blossom, as he says it. So this, I believe, sir, this is a very important converging point between
Yeah.
Nietzsche's Superman and the Aurobindo Superman. I had only touched upon how they transcended the ideas of dichotomy and multiplicity, but I think even more than that, this dimension is very, very significant. So I
Correct.
just wanted to add that. Also.
Yeah. This is a very, very important point. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I am very glad.
Sir, thank you so much for your comments, observations, questions.
Listen,
Thank you, sir.
I'm grateful to both of you for presenting wonderful speeches. I'm happy that both of you made an attempt to show how philosophy could be more relevant. This is something which is, for example, Vijay has pointed out the new vision of Sri Aurobindo, which is very important. And similarly, you have also pointed out the significance of the concept of education as discussed in Rabindranath Tagore. So these are two important thinkers who cannot neglect. So I'm happy that both of you have chosen these two topics, and you have very beautifully expressed your views on these two great thinkers. So I am thankful to the organizers and also thankful to you for giving me the nice opportunity of listening to both of you. And please,
Thank you so much, sir.
don't take rest. Please work further. I must see you in all the webinars. When I saw the webinar, I was so happy. So please continue your research. Don't take rest. This is what I would like to say, because this is what I learned from my teacher. You would say, don't take rest. You would ask me, what is it that you are reading now? Tell me. So I am asking the same questions to you. So you should go on reading, writing, and this is a real teacher's job. So I am sure that both of you will be doing all the best to you, both of you. And
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You say that often you say research begins only after PhD, only your learning starts.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with Badri on that. Yeah, that's true.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable presence, sir.
Thank you
Vijay,
so much,
thank you
sir.
so much for
Very
giving the
valuable
opportunity, sir. For the Suresh, sir, and HOD of Trivandrum University.
Is it audible, sir?
History Department.
Audible, sir?
Yeah. Yes, Suresh, you are very much audible. Yes, sir.
Some electricity problem, and here now I open on a mobile. That is the problem. It's electricity power failure.
I understand,
So
sir.
I can't open the laptop. That is Wi-Fi is off. That is the problem. So over to Gayatri, please.
Thank you, sir. Now let's move on to the end of the webinar. I cordially invite Dr. Suresh J, Assistant Professor, Department of History, University College, to extend the vote of thanks.
Here I am obliged to a vote of thanks. I thank Dr. L. Vijay, the person who gave us a comprehensive idea on the topic, Sir Sri Aurobindo Vision for a New India. I convey my heartful gratitude to him. Next, I would like to convey my gratitude to Dr. T.K. Badrinath, our distinguished resource person, who gave us an understanding on the contemporary relevance of educational philosophy of Tagore.
Thank you, sir.
I convey my sincerest gratitude to Dr. Panir Shelvam sir, and to express valuable words and to make a valuable discussion on time. Thank you, sir.
I was about to say, sir,
Thank you.
vote of thanks is not meant for me. I think vote of thanks should be given to Professor Paneeshalam sir for having stayed all along this lecture and making this observations and monitoring us till. I thought I should say the vote of thanks should go to Paneeshalam sir. Thank you, sir. You have also already mentioned Suresh sir.
we are teachers. The Panir Shalva as a guru, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
That is the difference. Guru, sir.
Very nice distinction.
Okay. So then I convey my sincerest gratitude to Dr. Sajeev Singh, Associate Professor History, who offered the welcome speech. I also convey my sincerest gratitude to India Iva. This program is telecasted through his channel in North India. My sincere thanks. Then I would like to thank all my colleagues and staff. Now I thank all the teachers, students, research scholars, and well-wishers and staff who took part in the lecture series. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would also like to thank Professor Nagaraj sir, Armugam sir, and Jeevan who took active part and raised also some questions. Thanks for all your active participation, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, sir. Your certificates of participation will be provided within 2 days. Kindly send your name, designation, and active email ID to the WhatsApp number provided in the chat box. This is the third of the online lecture series organized by Icpr and the Department of History, University College, Trivandrum. All of you kindly stay updated in the WhatsApp Telegram groups for further information. Once again, thank you all for your generous participation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
Suresh
sir.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much,
Thank you,
Suresh
sir.
sir.
Thank you,
Yes.
Panir
Thank
Shalvan,
you,
sir.
Suraj sir. Thank you, Vijay.
Thank you.
Thank you, it was a great joy to be with you.
Yes, both of us then with
We are-
Panneerselvam sir. Cross examination.
We are very thankful to Panir Shalvan sir and Nagaraj sir. I am a history faculty member. I don't know the
Nagaraj sir is still there,
valuable
yes.
teachings of Panir Shalvan sir. Next time, I think that it's better to inaugurate our function.
Yes, exactly.
2022, I welcome sir. Vijay sir, please give his,
definitely.
please send his number and details, and also Nagaraj sir also.
I'm leaving, sir. Suresha, thank you so much. Bye.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, Suresh sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
sir.
much.
Thank you. Please send your details on the prescribed WhatsApp number. Within 2 days, we send the e-certificate.
Sir, should we send anything from our part? Nothing, sir.
No, sir. Nothing, sir.
Okay.
We directly send a hard copy of certificate and other things, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Should I send my resume something? Nothing.
Please send it to me, sir. Because if it is to send it to you,